Why is Chanuka left out of the Mishnayos? In fact, because, historically speaking, people think, well, because the Mishnah was written before it happened, but obviously that's not true. There's plenty of time for Yehuda Hanasi to include Chanuka. In fact, Chanuka really is mentioned. That's not really, the question is, why isn't there really significant mention of Chanuka? Where is Chanuka mentioned? Chanuka is mentioned parenthetically, like a couple of places. One place, when the Gemara in Baba Kama, the Mishnah talks about, you have a camel outside with flax, and someone has a candle outside. So the whole sugya there, but the point of the Gemara, the point there is, if it's Chanukah time, then you should be more careful. The person should know that there's a fire outside, and you should be more careful with your load. So it's mentioned already, Chanukah. There's a Mishna Megillah that talks about the Kriyas Torah of the day. So clearly it was mentioned, it did exist because it was mentioned. But the question is, why didn't it get its own Masechta, like Megillah, like Purim? And we'll see, even in the Gemara itself, it's very little mentioned. Like, even if you're going to mention, even if you're not going to get its own Masechta, at least have more than 3, 4 blot in the beginning of the second parak. It goes through the different laws. Of course, there's plenty in there within those 3 dafin. Like, there's so many svarim on Chanukah that you have, as Rav Shachta like saying, there's more on Chanukah, more shtickle Torahs on Chanukah in the 3 blot than there is on the whole Purim, because Purim is only really a little bit, some of the first parak in Megillah. So why is it that it's no significant mention at all in the Mishnah? And we'll see why even the Gemara doesn't seem to be making much to do about it either. So we'll take some different approaches. We'll start off with Rav Reuven Margolis. We'll start off with a couple of global explanations. What I mean global is they're not limited to Chanukah. We have to find other mitzvahs that also aren't mentioned in the Mishnah, and then apply the reason maybe to Chanukah as well. So that's what he does. Historically speaking, it was time during the Bar Kokhba rebellion and all that, and Chanukah, the Rabbi Miyad Miyatim, the Jewish people are going to be shows. We talk about the revolt they had against the Syrian Greeks. So they want to revolt against us. So it start. No, I'm saying that. No, he's saying during that there was. He's saying during this time when Rabbi was writing the Mishnah, it was not exactly at that time.
It was after that.
Yeah. So I'm just saying. So therefore, that was still fresh, and he's saying it's still fresh in the mind, and he was concerned, and that's why the Rabbi left out many nationalistic mitzvahs. That's why he claims Talis and Tefillin is left out, and also the Mashiach is left out. There's a little mention we know from the famous Mishnah. We say in the Haggadah Leil Pesach, is there a mitzvah of remembering Yetzias Mitzrayim? So everyone agrees during the day there is a mitzvah. There's a machokas, so every night there's a mitzvah. So Lahavi Lamosa Mashiach. So there's a little allusion to Mashiach in the Mishnah. But again, so that's how Reuven Margolis wants to say. The reason why it's not a local question by Chanukah, it's a global question that the historical background where Yehuda Nasi was thinking at the time he was putting in the Mishnah, and that's why he left it out, because he was concerned it might lead to bloodshed, that they might think the Jews are going to rebel against him. That's the approach of Reuven Margolis. There's another approach, it's totally different, based on a Rambam in the Perish Hamish. It's also a global approach, but it's based on the Rambam in the Perish Hamishnayos in Menachos. Also wants to know why is Tzitzis and Tefillin left out of the Mishnayos. So the Rambam writes, he says, since Hadvarim Yiduim, everyone knew about them, that we do it all the time, we wear talis and tefillin every day, things that were so well known, the Rambam claims, weren't put in the Mishnah. So someone to claim based on this Rambam, Chanukah, what just happened was historically speaking a short time ago, so therefore it was still very well known among all the people, so therefore Rebbe left it out of the Mishnayos. So those are 2 possible suggestions, nothing to do with Chanukah per se, but taking other answers why talis, tefillin, and other mitzvahs are left out of the Mishnah, and then trying to plug it into Chanuka as well. So those are the first two.
The Rambam is very hard. I mean, Kriyat Shema is the first mitzvah.
Exactly. What
Mishna makes no sense. That's the most common.
Yeah. So why? I mean, it's true. We agree talit and tefillin, but I'm sure there are many other popular mitzvahs. Yeah. So yeah, it is. But at least the Rambam says it. It's difficult with the. But to the other answer, you're getting it's more speculative, historical. Here, at least the Rambam saying, you're right. It's a question why exactly. I could go with another 10 mitzvahs that are well known also that we'll put in the Mishnah. It's difficult. Each have the difficulties. The Rambam's difficult because why just talit and tefillin are popular? The many mitzvahs more than that were popular. But be as you may, that's why we'll have many suggestions because it really isn't, perhaps not one good answer. So a third suggestion would be is what they say in the name of the Chasim Sofer. Some people say the Chasim Sofer elsewhere gives the answer, he quotes the Rambam, and I just said, and people say he doesn't really give this answer, but either way, it's quoted in the Minhagim, everyone quotes the Chasim Sofer on this, that he basically says, Rabbi, we know, came from Sheva Yehuda, he came from, and he had the dynasty of Malchus, as we all know the pasuk we're going to read in a couple of weeks in Parshas Vayechi. Well, Yosser Sheva mi Yehuda. That Malchus will not leave Yehuda, and so there's a special mitzvah that the kingship has to remain with Yehuda. So we all know the Kohanim, the Chashmonaim, were not from Sheva Yehuda. In fact, there was double trouble. They were Kohanim and they weren't Sheva Yehuda. There's one special law for a Kohen to take on the Malchus, perhaps separation of church and state, as they say. But a Kohen should not be a Melech. And then in addition, nothing to do with, even if you're a non-Kohen, if you're not from Sheva Yehuda, you don't get the Malchus. So therefore, so they say over in the name of the Chasim Sofer, that even though he quotes the Ramban in the Parshas Vayechi, famous Ramban, that the Chashmonam were from the Chasidei Umos Ha'olam. They were the greatest people. And in fact, without them, Torah would have been forgotten without them. Yet we know they did a terrible avera, b'shogeg or whatever, but they were involved in a grievous mistake that they took over the Malchus, they took over the kingship, and that's why they say the Gemara says, I think it's in Baba Kama, the Gemara somewhere talks about someone who claims that they're from the dynasty, they're from the family of the Chashmonaim. There are only two options: they're either lying or they must have been an Eved, they must have been a slave there, but it no longer exists. And the Ramban claims, why is that? Because they violated Yosser Sheva Yehudas, even though they did tremendous things, but on their level they were treated very harshly, and hence they were punished. So the Chasim Sofer says, so Rabbi didn't want to publicize and embarrass the Chashmonam, who are great people, to put it on the headlines in the front paper, to put it in the Mishnayos, where everyone's going to be reading, to put what happened with the Chashmonim. Oh, Chanuka, oh yeah, those Chashmonim, those Kohanim, they took over the Malchus, or whatever the issue was. He didn't want to embarrass the dynasty, even though the Gemara already took care of that for us, but he didn't want to do it, and therefore that's how they say in the name of the Chasim Sofer. That's why he left it out of the Mishnayos, in order, because it was a busha, it was an embarrassment to the Chashmonim. That's how they say in the name of the Chasim Sofer.
It's hard to understand.
Again, this is difficult in its own right, yeah.
Well, he says that in Hammam have something different.
The Rebbe, because he came. He came, I know.
Upset.
I know.
Rebbe's from Hillel,
right,
which is from. It's from the mother's side, not the David Melech.
Yeah. Right. So I know he said. I know. I didn't. Others say it much more personally, like he was upset that they're taking over. It was a personal affront. But I see different people, different interpretations. Right. But that's when they bring down also. That one's, harder to understand also. Why all of a sudden, for this issue, it's a personal issue, but everything else is. But but that's how they do bring it down both ways. However, even if you're going to assume this is a good explanation, but even if you assume that is only clearly working with the Shitas Haramban. this is only working with the opinion of the Ramban, because the Ramban, as we said, even though they were Chasidei Umas HaOlam, but they did a terrible sin, they took over the Malchus. However, is it so clear that the Chashmonan did a terrible sin? Well, you'll have to explain why they got family was destroyed, maybe for something else. But was it so clear that they did wrong by taking over the Malchus? So if you open up the Rambam in the beginning of Hilchos Chanuka, you get a totally different picture. Maybe we'll discuss this next. The Rambam does something he usually doesn't do in Mishna, so he goes into the whole history of Chanuka by Yesheni, the whole works. And then at the end of it, for our purposes, and he writes, and the Chashmonim took over, and there was Jewish controlled government for over 200 years. And the Rambam is writing that as a good thing, as a Yeshua, as a salvation. And you know what? It's a good thing when the Jews run their own country, when they run Eretz Yisrael. So clearly, the Rambam knew the Chashmonim were warren from Sheva Yehuda. They were Kohanim, and yet the Rambam seems to think, oh, great work, Chashmonim. It's a great thing. We had the Kahun, we had the Malchus for 200 years. So what the Kudas HaMachlokas between the Ramban and the Rambam? Why is the Ramban so down on them, and the Rambam seems to be very...
half of it. It's only about 100 years of the Chashmonaim.
But they have Rabbi.
No, but they only took the Malchus 2 generations later.
Right, that's someone that
They
came...
didn't do it. I mean, it was much later when they actually took the Malchus.
No.
I know, that's why some claim...
What? No.
Shimon took Malchus.
He didn't take Malchus.
What?
The first Hashmonaim king was 2 generations off.
Yes, some claim that to answer it, they didn't really do it. It was other people who did. I've seen that brought down also.
Yeah, but that's...
They never took control of the country. They were fighting the wars.
Shimon was that.
There's no historical evidence.
Well, there's actually historical evidence. The historical evidence that they say he had coins printed with his, which is a king. But on the bottom he has written something like Chaver Yehudim or something. The Gedavka didn't say Melech, but that was just because he's trying to avoid it. But in fact, he was a king.
So that's how right. That's what they discussed. That's why some trying to defend it. They say they never took it over. Right. So this sort of interesting possibility. Not so much in the particular of the Chashmona, but more fundamentally in the Shitas HaRambam and the Rambam, which at least it's his first step to understanding their positions on it. So we know there's a Gemara in Sanhedrin, the second parak. A lot of interesting Gemaras in Sanhedrin, but the second parak is about the Kohen Gadol, etc. Talks about the Melech. So the Chumash tells us, I think it's Parashat Shoftim, Som Tasim Alav Melech. There's a mitzvah in the Torah to appoint a king. And that's the whole discussion. Navi maybe wasn't the time yet when they asked for a king and God was upset. The bottom line, the Torah has a mitzvah. So it's interesting, Machokas in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, the second parak, what exactly is the nature of this mitzvah? So one opinion is, they focus on the first part of the pasuk. Som Tasim Alav Melech. It's in a command. You have to. It's like you have to put on tefillin in the morning. You have an obligation to appoint a king. That's a mitzvah like any other mitzvah. And the other opinion says, based on the end of the psukim, the implications are that, no, you don't have to. It's only if, it's a rishus. So it's a machlokas in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, whether it's a chiyav, it's a chova to appoint a king, or no. So if you want to, you can, but you don't have to. So this machlokas in the Gemara turns out to be a machlokas, a Rambam and the Ramban. So perhaps it's Rishitason, because it's the Ramban learns the Shita that one has an obligation to that the Ramban learns that one is only a rishus to appoint a king, and the Rambam learns it's an obligation to appoint a king. Why is that relevant? Because so according to the Ramban. So let's say you had no one from Sheva Yehuda. Even if you have someone from Sheva Yehuda, but if you don't have anyone Roy from Sheva Yehuda, then certainly if you don't have someone who could be a king, so it's a rishus. So why do if you don't have the right person, don't appoint anyone. There shouldn't be a king. It's only a rishus to begin with, and when the right time is, you do it. Therefore, the Ramban finds a more fault with someone Kohanim who, assuming they took it over, it becomes very hard line. But the Rambam learns it's an obligation to appoint a king. So like with the Makam She'enish is Shaili Yozish, that the Rambam agrees it's not ideal. Ideally we should have had a king from Sheva Yehuda, but what could I do? We need to have a king. There was no one qualified, and they stepped up to the plate, so to speak. That's just like the first step. We have to, get into more exactly the facts. What did they do? But at least it's easier to understand our positions a little more when we look at it from the shittas on kingship in general. So the point is, the Chasam Sofer is clearly working with the Ramban, that it was a disgrace to the Chashmonaim, and therefore, or whether he was upset because it was his family, whatever the reason, they did something wrong, and he didn't want to embarrass the Chashmonaim, so therefore he left it out. However, according to the Rambam, we still need an answer. The Rambam holds it's a Yeshua. It's a positive thing that they took over. We had Jewish kingship. So that's where the famous answer from Selevan comes, and he wants to give an explanation according to the Rambam, who holds it was a good thing that the Chashmonaim took over the Malchus for 100, 200 years. So if that's the case, then if it's a good thing, then certainly why don't you publicize it then? Mitzvah, like we learned last week by Reuven, the famous Chazal. If Reuven would have known that they were going to write about him, that what he didn't do, he would have went down, him and Yehuda, they would have went down and put him Yosef on their shoulders and carried him out. In other words, they knew. So what does that mean? If they knew they could make a movie later on, so obviously the Rabbi Yaakov others point out this to teach us the importance of every Maisa, that we don't realize many times it looks like an insignificant act at the time, but you never realize how one little act can have tremendous impact later on. So always have to be aware of that. But either way, so they point out that there should have been a mitzvah. A great thing they did, it's the Yeshua. Why doesn't Rabbi put it in the Mishnah? So Rav Soloveitchik points out as follows. There's a Gemara in Moed Katan. The Gemara tells us that if someone rips a Sefer Torah, or if someone burns a Sefer Torah, gets destroyed, there's halacha of Kriya. We know there's halacha when someone becomes an Avel, or really the halacha actually of Kriya is Me'ikar Din HaGemara is actually if you're there, B'Shas Misa, not just limited to your relatives, but Lamaisa, the minig is we don't do it usually B'Shas Misa, and the post say because the person's not in the proper frame of mind, they don't know what to do, which we had a rip, so the minig is you wait to the Kfura. But Me'ikar Din, you're supposed to do Kriya right away. So not only is there halacha where you rip Kriya when someone dies, but we know it is also halacha of a Sefer Torah. If a Sefer Torah gets burned, so the Gemara says you have to rip Kriya twice. Why twice? Once for the cloth, once for the parchment, and once for the osios, and once for the letters. So that's what the Gemara says. So the Rav adds that we have an apparent contradiction. We have a famous Gemara with Chanukah ben Trajon, who was giving up his life al Kiddush Hashem, and they were torturing him. They put the whole details. They put the wall around, and the students asked, Rabbi, what do you see? Tell us. So he says, you know what I see? I see the Sefer Torah burning. I see the parchment burning, but the osios, the letters, are going to Shamayim. So what do you mean? So why do we need Kriya twice then? If the letters are going to heaven, so why are we ripping Kriya on the parchment and that? So, and we'll also, the Rav pointed out, we find another language. By the Greeks we find the lashon of Tuma, the Timu kol Hashmanim. By the Romans it's Churban, it's destruction. So what's the difference between these terms? So Rav Soloveitchik pointed out as follows. He says, what's the difference between the two Gemaras? Why is it in one Gemara the parchment and the osios are burning? You need Kriya twice, but the Gemara with Chanukah ben Trajon, you only have the parchment burning. And he says because it depends who did the burning. Unfortunately, Rachmana Litzlan, there was a Jew who burnt the Sefer Torah. The Gemara Moed Katan talks about a Yid who burnt the Sefer Torah. A Jew who has shaykhis to Torah, he has the ability, unfortunately sometimes a Jew has the ability to do worse than a non-Jew could do. As we all know the famous Chazal, that before a person's born, that the Malach is teaching them Kol Torah Kulo, and then before they go out they give a little patch and they forget it all. So the question is, so why bother? And the answer is because every Jew gives number one, the Rechaim B'Lashon has the pshat, because that's why L'chayiv in Kfura, because every Jew has a kedusha, because kedusha comes from Torah, and therefore that's why. And that's why, technically speaking, Goyim have mitzvahs, but they're tashmishe mitzvah. We know tashmishe mitzvah in Nizrakim. You don't have to. I'm not saying you can't. You're allowed to, but al pidin, there's no chiyuv of, perhaps in Eretz Yisrael, Yushalayim is a different halacha, but in terms of the status. So he points out, a Jew is burning the Sefer Torah. A Jew has shaykhs to the Torah, he can burn not only the physical parchment, but also the letters. But when Hananiah ben Trajan, it was a soldier, the Roman soldier, or one of the non-Jewish soldiers who burned the Torah. The most a guy could do, they'll only burn the parchment, but they can't burn the Yosef. We know the Nazis, they did it throughout. They specifically did things that to try to attack the Yiddishkeit. In fact, that's why the classical thing is when they wanted to pick a date for I think it was Yom HaShoah, so there was a whole discussion on, many discussions on, some said you should pick Asar B'Tevis, which is actually coming up as a date. Others said you should pick the day of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, because that's what the secularists said. So this parenthetically, so the reason why they couldn't take that date is because that was the date of Leil Pesach. It was the night of Pesach, and I'm pointing out that it wasn't coincidental. That's when the Nazis B'davka attacked the Jews. They knew they knew that when is the family going to be together at night of Pesach. So they waited for those specific. The Nazis did that all the time. They try to take the spirit out of us. So a Jew could even burn not only the parchment but the letters, and we rip Kriya twice. But a guy only has shaykhs to the parchment, and that's what the Romans were churban. They destroyed it. But the Greeks, it's Timul Kol Hashmanim. In fact, it's a famous kash of the Baal Hamor. We know we have a principle: Ein Adam Oser Davar She'eno Shalo. There's a principle: you can't prohibit something which doesn't belong to you. I.e., if someone comes in and they want to worship the dining room table as avodah zarah, and they come in and bow down to it, does that mean my table is asa bahana? So no. Ein Adam Oser Davar She'eno Shalo. You can't prohibit. Let me just point out. However, if someone comes in and pours treif on your dishes, they are treif, because it's the principle of ein adam osa. Don't you know it's only a machshava? Obviously, if lamaisa you treifed up something, it's treif, but avodah zarah is in the mind. So they can't just turn your house into an avodah zarah and it be ein adam osa davar she'enu. So the kasher, the Baal Hamor is. What do you mean b'timul kol hashmanim? How could the Greeks defile the temple? It wasn't theirs, it's our temple. So therefore, how could it, so what's the pshat? So there is a Rabban over there, there's a famous Baal Hamor that unfortunately, it wasn't the Yavanim, who they don't worry, they did that part, different chazal, they brought pig in, they brought everything to try to matam it, but Ein Adam Osa Davar She'en Shalo. Unfortunately, it was the Misyavdim, it was the assimilated Jews who came in and they defile. Only a Jew could defile the temple, and that's why. And that's why, if you notice, in the Rav points out in the Al Hanisim, you have all these contrasts, but you don't have Jew versus Greeks. So why not? So of course, not to take away the villain. Of course, the Syrian Greeks deserved it. But as we point out, there's a famous answer they say in the Haggadah. When we begin the Haggadah, so one of the first things we do is the karpas we dip into salt water, and there are many explanations. But there's an interesting explanation that karpas is referring to the Xonas Pasim that we just had. That it was referring to that's why the dipping of water. Different mafarshim want to tie it in. So the question is why, assuming that the pshat is correct, why are we beginning the seder with Mechiras Yosef? That's not, we're talking about Yetzias Mitzrayim. Let's focus on what. So the answer is, it's true the Egyptians are the villain and they got punished for it. But as always, we need a turning inward. We have to realize it never would have happened, whatever that means exactly, but it never would have happened without Mechiras Yosef, and that was the beginning of the story. So we always have to. So not that the anti-Semites, they deserve to be punished, and they will be. But from our point of view, we also have to realize how we can do more. And that's what the Haggadah begins, and that's what the Rav explained here. The reason why Rebbe left it out, it wasn't the Chashmonaim did a great thing. As the Rambam writes, they took over the kingship. It was Yeshua. It was an abusha to the Jewish people. It was the Misyavnim, our assimilated Jews, we let come in, or we didn't let, they did it anyway. They came in and they were Metame Kol Hashmanim. Only a Jew could go ahead and defile the temple. And that's a tremendous embarrassment to the Jewish people. Hence, Rebbe left it out of the Mishnah. So far we have 4 pshat. And number 1 was Ruvain Margolis, a global explanation why Talis, Tefillin, Mashiach is left out. Because it was a time, at the time when they were concerned, Rebbe was concerned about the non-Jewish nations looking at the Jews that are going to rebel, etc. So they left out the nationalistic mitzvahs, Mashiach and Chanuka, which is the small beating the many. Then we had the Rambam of Heirosh Mishnah. It's not about Chanuka, but why Talis and Tefillin is left out. He says it's well known. So a lot of things are well known, but apparently Talis and Tefillin are more well known, and therefore it was left out. So therefore something that's Chanuka just happened a couple hundred years ago, that was well known, so leave it out. Then we had the Chasim Sofer, different interpretations, whether he was upset because they took over from the Shevi Yehuda, or he didn't want to embarrass the Chashmonaim that they were Kohanim and they took over the kingship. And according to the Rambam, that's what the Rambam says it was a good thing. So that's what the Rabbi explains. According to the Rambam, the reason why Rebbe left it out is because it was embarrassment to the Jewish people that the Misyavdim, that we were Matami the temple. So all these answers, some you like more than others, they all deal with more external factors, either historically, or you have to come out what really he should have mentioned in the Mishnah. We're giving reasons why he didn't. So I'm going to suggest the 5th explanation, maybe to show how I don't think Rebbe left it out on purpose. I think Rebbe left it out on purpose. That why is it left out of the Mishnah? Because we all know the Gemara tells us in Yuma and Daf Chavches Amud Beis, I think it says Ramanatzeach Avayelas Hashachar. They quote the pasuk in Tehillim that this that Purim is Sof Kol Hanisim. That just like Delilah, the morning is the end of night, so too Esther is Sof Kol Hanisim. Purim was the last of the miracles. So, the Gemara says that you're forgetting something. Va'ikka Chanukah. What about Chanukah? What do you mean the miracle? The miracles in Chanukah? So the Gemara, the different interpretations, how you're going to answer the Gemara, but the way the interpretation I'll take here is basically Purim was the last of the Torah of Iksav. It was the 24 books. It was the last one to make it in. It was the Torah of Iksav. Chanukah was the Torah of Al Peh miracle. So we'll have to explain what that means. What do you mean? What's the Torah of Iksav? What's the written law miracle? And what's an oral law miracle? And this parenthetically, that's how they some point out as well. We know Chanukah, many meanings, but the simple pshat Chanuka, the rest of the 25th day of Kislev. Others say Derek Drush Chanuka. They wanted to make it the 25th book, and they said no, it's over. We closed up shop. We're not making it into the book of Tanakh. So Chanuka. So either way, so what's the pshat? Purim is the last of the Torah of Iksav miracles, and Chanukah isn't. The Vilna Gaon and others explain, and all the Bali, all the Hasidic Svarim, they want to tie Rachel and Leah into it. They all talk about the contrast, the first Beis HaMikdash versus the second, and Rachel versus Leah. So let's talk to the Vilna Gaon explain when they talk in terms of Rachel and Leah, obviously besides their actual lives and people. What was the difference between Rachel and Leah, at least from Yaakov's perspective? Leah was a gift, not a gift he didn't ask for, but a gift he got. That basically he had to work 14 years to get Rachel, but basically he got Leah. So Leah basically no work. Basically he got Leah as a wife, but Rachel he worked very hard. So Torah Shebeksav and the Nevi'im, and that's why in the Bayis Rishon we had many things we didn't have. We still had the many things we didn't have in the Bayis Sheni that we had in the Bayis Rishon. And one of the things of a Navi, a task it is, he tells you what to do. In other words, that's what we don't have today. We're in Golis now, one of the pros and cons, but The fact is that we don't have Nevi'im today, and therefore, that's why you have so many different drachim in Avodas Hashem. You had the 12 Shvatim, because it's not going to be one way. People have different neshamas and different ways for different people. But in the Navi, like in the Midbar, you don't need, as the Ramban writes in Parashas Emor, you don't need doctors. You didn't need doctors in the time in the Dor HaMidbar. You went to a Navi, because if you had a physical ailment, it's reflective of a sin you did, to go to a Kohen and he'll tell you, or whoever, you didn't need it. So it's a different type of hanuka. So Bayis Risha was more with the Navi, Bayis Sheni was more, we had to figure out things.
So why they die in the Dor HaMidbar?
No, why?
So they didn't need doctors, because you go to a Kohen and ask them.
No, they died because they sinned. I'm saying a different.
When they got sick, they should have gone to the Kohen and said, "Hey, what's wrong? They shouldn't have died."
No, I'm saying that's what the rabbis in general. I mean, not, obviously they got punished for the sin of Barak. So maybe not everything there was a cure for or a cure. The fact that the Kohen could tell you, well, that's it. There's no cure for this one. Apparently, because
but then you have to do it.
Right. So
they weren't allowed into the land. I mean,
right. He's not talking in that context anyway. He's just talking about in general. It was a different type of hanuka. And that's why Rav Moshe has a famous tshuva on life insurance, whether it's chisaron and amuna to have life insurance, etc. So we assume it's not and it's probably a chiyuv to have, not just a nice thing. But either way, so they point out that the Torah Shebeksav is basically went to Har Sinai, and Moshe did the work, everything, and we come down and we got the Torah. Basically, it's a gift. Basically, the Torah Shebeksav is a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Torah Shabbat Peh, we all know about Torah Shabbat Peh. You go into a yeshiva, Beis HaMedrash, the Mechamta Shel Torah. It's not like a library. You're sitting there quiet. Everyone's screaming at each other. You chavrusa this, and that's not the pshat. Part of Torah Shabbat Peh is you got to work on it. It's the amelas of Lo Bashamayim. The Torah was given for us to figure out. The Torah Shabbat Tzav God gave us, but Torah Shabbat Peh is for us to figure out. And that's why they point out. It's interesting. Of all the places, where do we find the sugya of the mitzvahs d'Rabbanan, of the power of the Chachamim? So it's in the sugya in Shabbos of Chanuka. The Gemara, and the famous kasha, the Gemara is that how do we make a bracha? We made a bracha tonight. Asher Kedisharo b'mitzosav v'tzivanu. God, you commanded us. You commanded us in the Chanuka. But as we all know, Chanukah is not biblical. God didn't command us. It came much later on. So how can we make the bracha v'tzivanu? That's the two opinions in the Gemara, whether it's based on Lo Sasar ben Adavar, Asher Yegidach Yamino Smo, or not to turn away from the Chachamim, or it's based on Shalavicha v'Yagdecha, and that's a whole discussion there, not for tonight's share, but a whole famous Machlokes, Rambam, Rabban, the nature of the Chachamim, subject the rights to a Chumrah, a whole discussion on that is Zakam Amrei. But the point is, why all of a sudden we're talking about the power of the Chachamim? Why there's so many other sugyas the Gemaras could have brought down, but that's the yesod of Chanukah. That's when the explosion of Torah Shabbat Peh began during this time period. And that's what it means. That the Torah Shabbat Peh nace, it's not the standard nace that you have. Torah Shabbat Ksav is easy come, easy go. Basically, God gave it to us, we didn't do anything for it. Doesn't mean we can't appreciate the gift, but basically we didn't work for it, we got it. But Torah Shabbat Peh, it's dynamic. In fact, that's why they say that Rav Chaim Volozhin says over about his Rebbe, the Vilna Gaon, that many times he's told him he went to sleep at night with a lot of questions, and at night the angels came to start teaching and giving him the answer, and he shooed him away. So I guess the Machaber, Rav Yosef Cairo, in his sefer, I guess he didn't shoot them away. He has a part of the Magid Meisharim. He has a whole chelak where he says, I went to sleep with questions and I hear the answers. He took them. But the Vilna Gaon apparently didn't take them. There's different reasons why. So Rav Chaim Volozhin is because he wanted to be my Torah. Torah, so I don't want that. It's all part of Yigiyah. Torah Shabbat, all about is doing it yourself. That's the yesod of Torah Shabbat Peh. So perhaps we could suggest maybe that's why Rebbe left it out of the Mishnah. And that's why it's very, even in the Gemara, a couple of pages of Gemara, it's Davka Chanukah is the Yantav of Torah Shabbat Peh. It's the Torah Shabbat Peh of the Torah Shabbat Peh. So it's not a punishment for the Chashbonam, the Jews. It might be true, but perhaps it's left out because that's what he's teaching us. This is the Yisod of Torah Shabbat Peh. As we all know, Rabbi was very reluctant to put the Torah Shabbat Peh into print because for many reasons, but obviously Eis Ratzos, they would be forgotten. But besides that, the Torah Shabbat Peh is very dynamic. Once you put something into print, you're much more limited. That's why, in fact, I think Rizal Salanter said today the Gemara, not in terms of Kedusha, but today the Gemara has a status like the Chumash. What he meant to say is, today now the Gemara is given to us. We don't have a right to argue on the Gemara. We can, different interpretations, what the Gemara means, but we can't argue it's Sof Hara, Ravina Ravashi. We can argue on the Rishonim, Achronim, all that. That's up for interpretation. But the Gemara itself, once Rabbi put it into print, that's it. So to speak, it lost its dynamic. It used to be every base in every generation. That's the whole Maisa with Boaz, they say, why he didn't want to, he was reluctant to marry Rus in the beginning. The whole Gemara in Yevamos, that they went back and forth, not the Boaz, the Poni Amoni, why he didn't want, because he said Pentishcha Zaro or something like that. He said he was afraid of his kids, that he thought that they'd say that they take away Lo Yavel Amoni. The halacha is, we have a tradition that it's Ammon and Moab, only the men and not the women are included. So he was concerned that, okay, that's what they say now, but we know how Torah Shabbat works. They'll get together 10 years later, 15 years later, and they'll say, oh no, that's wrong. It's always the men and women, and I'll be like, I won't even be Jewish. It's like, I'll be marrying a non-Jew, or whatever the case may be. So that was there's a whole Brisker Rav on here, where he goes to explain the Gemara, which is a separate question. Once, in other words, you have the grandfather clause. Once Beis Din did do, even if they could change the law, when those people were affected, they become non-Jewish. That's a separate discussion. The Chidah is a discussion on it. But the Brisker Rav explains the Gemara. He says, because it seems to repeat the same discussion, and then the second time he's satisfied. So the Brisker Rav, you look at the Gemara, because the second time he said we have a tradition from, I think, Shmuel Haramasi. It's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Once he heard it was a halacha l'Moshe Misinai, that gets into the Rambam. It's a whole discussion on that. He gets into different levels of Torah Shabbat Peh. So even though we have to understand many Gemaras that seem to be a machovet on halacha l'Moshe Misinai, but the Rambam writes, halacha l'Moshe Misinai you can't argue on. It's a given. The Yud Gimel Midos, if it's based on Yud Gimel Midos, then every Beis Din has a right to interpret the way they see it. They did. During Bayis Rishon, Bayis Sheni, how they interpreted this Chayayi and Mayim, we find throughout. That's only if it's through Yud Gimel Midos. But if it's a halach l'Moshe Misinai, end of discussion. So that's what he explains. At the end of the Gemara says, it was a halach l'Moshe Misinai. If it's a halach l'Moshe Misinai, so then I realize it can't change. I don't have to worry. Now I can marry Ruth because I know Lo Yavel Amonu Hashem will never change because it's a halach l'Moshe Misinai. So that's the Yisod. Yisod Torah Shabbat Peh is a dynamic, and therefore once we had no choice, because the other choice is you didn't want the Chashbonayim. Without them, the Torah would have been forgotten, and we needed Rabbi also to keep the Torah going, Eis Ratzos. So you had to put it into print so we don't forget it. But unfortunately, becoming into print also, this reluctance was we still lose the dynamic. We still have plenty of dynamics in Torah Shabbat Peh. But in terms of arguing on the Gemara, that's not an option anymore. The Gemara is like the given in geometry. And then we got as Rav Chaim used to say, our job is to understand the Rishonim, how they interpret the Gemara. We can't, we can't go ahead and say the Gemara is wrong. Whether as a general rule, it's a separate discussion whether we say different Gemaras about sciences or history. Do we have to assume that when Chazal made different comments, was that through Ruach HaKodesh? Was that a tradition? They were just saying the science of the times. Are they saying the whole discussion? What happens to the sun at night? Which are major. I think Selevan's putting out a book on that, or I saw an article somebody gave me on that. But basically, it goes through it's the Gemara actually. And the Gemara says the Chachmei Yisrael were wrong, so you get into very, very interesting topics that perhaps, hardly controversial ones in terms of what's pshat, the Chachmei Yisrael. So what does that mean? Maybe there's only an agaz, there's illusion. That's not what it doesn't mean. The sun, you have from one end to the other, or you could say, well, it's not a problem. Chazal didn't know the sciences of today. So that itself is a separate discussion. But we have, plenty of dynamics today. We take the principles and apply it. But in terms of the Gemara, so Rabbi wanted specifically, he wanted Chanuka, the Yontif, the Torah Shabbat Peh, and therefore Rabbi left it out of the Mishnah, and he had very little mention the Gemara, because he wanted to keep Chanuka, which represents the Torah Shabbat Peh. It's our input, it's the dynamic, and that's why the Ramah writes in Shulchan Aruch, it's a whole machlokas Rishonim, whether we have a Chi of Suda today or Chanukah. And that means, perhaps all 8 days of Chanukah to have a Suda. Because many Rishonim say no, but the Rambam, in the beginning of Hilchos Chanukah, the Rambam Shita is, we do have a Suda. And we always try to compare and contrast. Since Chanukah and Purim are very similar, we try to find differences. When two things are polar opposites, if they ask for differences, there are no similarities. But when you have things which are very close, it's always interesting to try to find differences between things which are similar. So one of the famous questions from the Lavush and others are, so why is Purim, not according to the Rambam, but according to the we paskin, why is there a Chi of Suda on Purim, but not a Chi of Suda on Chanukah? So the famous answer of the Lavush is because that Purim, it came from a much more physical side. Haman came lahashmil u'ahara is called Yehudim. So therefore it was a physical thing, and therefore we celebrated a physical way by having a meal. But Chanukah, they didn't want us dead. They wanted us to take on the Greek culture, stop keeping Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, Milah, Torah, the works. It's only because we didn't we had to fight to it. So it was much more spiritual. So we celebrate L'Halal L'Hodah. We light Chanukah candles, and we say Hallel every day. So therefore, since we celebrate in a spiritual way, therefore there was no Chi of Suda. Or others point out, because Purim maybe was a day of Matan Torah, by the Gemara Peiches Amid Beis or Amid Aleph, that Kafir of Har Kagigas, the Purim was a reaccepting of the Kabbalah Torah, and therefore that's why it has a Suda, etc. So whatever the reason is, and in fact, that's why some Mepharshim point out, our Chazal gave us 2 Yom Tovim D'Rabbanan, gave us 2 rabbinical holidays. The holiday of Chanukah and the holiday of Purim. I think it's Rabbi Rosella Epstein points out that because it represents the 2 types of anti-Semitism. You have the anti-Semitism of the Haman, the Hitler. They don't care, you can believe in God. I don't care if you don't believe in God. I want you dead. You're a Jew and that's it. We're going to kill you. And then you have the other type, religious anti-Semitism, the time of Chanukah, where we want you to assimilate. We don't want you dead, but if you don't, then we will. And in fact, that's the famous Beis HaLevi. We had a couple of weeks ago when Yaakov was praying. It says, Hatzileni na miyad achi miyad Esav. Save me from the hands of my brother, save me from the hands of Esav. We all know, that's old news, we all know Esav and Yaakov are brothers, so why is it redundant? So that's what the Beis HaLevi points out. There are 2 types of anti-Semitism. Miyad achi, they come as your brother, Jews for Jesus, or they come, they want to get you to intermarry, etc. That's the Miyad achi. And Miyad Esav, that they sit there with the pogroms and the sword, they're out to kill us. And we see that Yaakov prayed first Miyad achi. That's the more dangerous one in terms of definitely spiritually, that used to be, the Jews didn't have an option of intermarriage. Who would marry a Jew? But today, a great thing, and I'm not saying we should switch it around, it's great that we're accepted to a certain extent in society. We have religious freedom, but obviously it comes with a cost as well, that in terms of intermarriage, assimilation, etc. And as the Beis HaLevi points out, the more dangerous one is Miyad achi, Miyad Esav. And that's why Chazal gave us 2 Yom Tovim, when to remember Purim, the anti-Semitism of destruction, but Chanukah is the anti-Semitism, religious it was about it was about the uniqueness of being a Jew, and that's why they attacked all the different things specifically about Jew, and that's why we have these two Yom Tovim of Chanuka and Purim. They represent the different types of anti-Semitism.
How's Hanukkah Torah Shabbat Peh? I'm saying how is that that's the like the
well, that's what number one Chanukah, that's what the Gemara calls it. The Chanukah says it's the Torah Shabbat Peh, and then that's when actually they say that's when the explosion of all Torah Shabbat Peh started. I guess the different writings and all these things came out, and it's basically after we no longer had we didn't have the Nevi'im and all that, so it's a different type of learning.
The Gemara actually calls it Torah.
Yeah, that's the Gemara in Yuma. It says it's the Torah Shabbat Peh. It's the Torah Shabbat Peh. So using that, I just used the different examples they give with Rachel and Leah. So I used that to give a possible answer of why. So to conclude, so we have five possible answers. We have a Reuven Margolis, that historical Mashiach, Talis, Tefillin, nationalistic mitzvahs were concerned with rebellion. We had to leave it out. Nothing special about Chanukah. The Rambam and Perish HaMishnayos says Talis and Tefillin because it was well known. So perhaps Chanukah just happened a couple hundred years ago. It was well known. Hence, that's why Rabbi left it out. Then you have two different interpretations in the Chasam Sofer, either because he was upset that they took over their family's malchus, or the other explanation that they were Kohanim and they took over the malchus. It was embarrassment to the Kohanim, so that's why he left it out. So we had the Rav working with the Rambam's approach, that assuming the Chashbonim were a good thing to take over. So then we explained the whole Gemara with Moed Katan about two kriyas. That's when a Jew burns the Sefer Torah, he has shachas to both the parchment and the letter, so therefore you need two kriyas. But a guy can only take ahead and burn the parchment. That's the pshat. Unfortunately, it was a misyabdim. It was the Jews who defiled the temple. It was a tremendous embarrassment in Jewish history, and that's why he left it out of the Mishnah. And then we suggested a fifth explanation that no, it's not a punishment. That's the way Rabbi wanted it. Since Chanukah represents, it's the yontif of Torah Shabbat Peh, and the explosion, even in the Gemara, so Vidavka left it Torah Shabbat Peh, because the essence of Torah Shabbat Peh is oral, and that's what the whole yontif of Chanukah represents, and that's why, as I was going to say, the Ramah writes, since it's a machlokas rishonim, he doesn't write there, but that's what I'm telling you, that since it's a machlokas, the Ramah writes, you know what? When you have Yisuda, have Shiros, V'tishbachos, have Divrei Torah. Because even though you don't have a Chi of Suda, but it's our job to turn it into a Suda Mitzvah. That's why Chanukah probably more than any other Yontif is, and even in yeshivas it's this way. If you don't do anything on Chanukah, it's like a regular day. Most people are in Chanukah. You come home, you light candles, and that's it. And by Chanukah, even if you don't, because Chanukah represents Torah Shabbat Peh. So Purim to a certain extent is like this, but Chanukah even more. It's the more you put it. If you don't put anything into it, you're not going to get much out of it. But Chanukah, and that's why the Ramah says you should do Shira, you make it into a Sudas mitzvah. Well, we pass the only time you can make a Shechiyanu, you need a Ma'isa Hadulaka. We don't pass like the Meiri, that you can do a Shechiyanu even if you don't have, because part of the whole Yisod of Chanukah is the Torah Shabbat Peh. It has to come from us. So as long as we do something, the Chanukah will be more meaningful. The more we put, like anything in life, the more you put into it, the more you'll get out of it.
Sure, yeah.